Explore the thoughtless sphere. Embark on a life-changing journey of self-discovery. Embrace harmony with self, with others, with Earth. One world in a new world. Zen Benefiel skillfully ignites conversations, guiding guests to reveal personal journeys and perspectives. Listeners are inspired to seek knowledge and find wisdom in their own lives. Join this transformative journey as we navigate the depth of human experience.
Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, please do like, subscribe, share, comment. That's what makes the difference in the world today. That's the social credibility that you can help us with in order to spread this undeniably perfected message that we're delivering in bridging worlds, both inner and outer, so that we can be more fully expressive of the love that we have and the love that we deserve. That's the ultimate goal. Also, what I'd like you to do is visit planetaryscitizens.net. There's a free book to download there called Planetary Citizens, Awakening the Heart of Humanity. And that book will change your perspective. I guarantee it, because it gives you examples of how the oneness that we know to be true is actually permeating society that we already experience. We just don't see it yet. So that's a wonderful exploration that you'll have. And please do visit the site and explore it. It's pretty deep and expansive, and I know you'll get a lot from it. So this week's guest, thank you very much, is Leon Kammer. He is a very interesting gentleman from the UK who traversed from early beginnings in Soviet Union and his family gallivanting all over the place and finally landing in the UK. He is today a transformative coach who is an avid student of the Kabbalah. And we will get into that shortly because I know this is going to be a great conversation, an apocalyptic chat that you won't want to miss. So we'll be right back. Don't go away. You know, there's a lot of chaos and confusion in the world today. There doesn't have to be for you. You can turn that chaos into clarity. Now, how can you do that? Well, first of all, by talking to me, your coach, integral, transformational, whatever you want to call that. I can help you figure out you so that you can put you in order and then create some action plans to achieve your dreams, whatever those might be. You can achieve anything that you put your mind to with the attention, intention, and interactions that go along with that. And that's what we discover in the process. You know, you might have some great times with the DIY stuff that's online now, using ChatGPT, all of that. That's great, and it might serve a purpose to a point. However, you don't get the empathy, the understanding, the real ear that you would from a coach. So I invite you, schedule an appointment, let's have a chat, and we can find out what's in it for you. Have a great day. Leon, it is so great to have you here. I love the prelim conversation. I know this is going to be deep. So thank you for showing up and being available.
I appreciate you having me, Zen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh,
Where
you're
are you?
welcome.
I don't even know where you are in the States.
Oh, I'm in a state of confusion, mostly.
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. I'm in Arizona,
Oh,
Chandler
okay.
specifically, and been here in the Arizona, Phoenix area for 45 years now. It feels more like home than anywhere in the world. Now,
Great.
and in lieu of that, you know, there's lots of conversations that we have. Most of them are bereft of sharing what goes on inside of us, which I feel is most important today because we've had this huge kerfuffle recently that got people to question who they are, where they're at, what they're doing, what's real, what's not, and how they can engage life better. So one of those things that can be done is supporting these conversations to get our inner awareness, our weirdness out in the open and not feel like it's like we're so vulnerable, right? Like we're going to be rejected or thought weird or crazy or whatever, which many of us have over the years. So today that's much different. How did you first enter that understanding that there's greater connection that you have with an expanded reality? And most of us have it when we're kids, right? And then we forget. How did you first experience it?
I can't say that I experienced it as a kid. I experienced it around 12 years ago when I joined Kabbalah, which
Hmm,
is an ancient 4,000-year-old wisdom.
right.
As a kid, uh, I mean, I had it pretty tough. I don't want to do the crying thing, but we were immigrants. We came to Australia from Germany after growing up in Kazakhstan in Russia. So it was pretty tough for me. I had to sort of fend for myself because my parents didn't speak any language when they came to Australia. So I had to fend for myself, and I think I had to hit the ground running. And I always wanted to grow up being a fashion designer, actually. It had nothing to do with spirituality. I wasn't brought up in any form of a spiritual home, or my father was an atheist, and,
All right.
I'm Jewish, so obviously we went for the bar mitzvah, but that was about it. And I grew up wanting to be a fashion designer, which actually happened. Studied fashion. I was the only kid in the class of 18 girls, which was fun. And
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
yeah, simultaneously, something always sort of tapped me on the shoulder about being out there, showbiz, fashion, everything that was sort of, on a
Well,
platform.
yeah, you're bringing
Mm,
the designs, the creativity, the inspiration, the presentation,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Of what was it? Dress for success, right? Was
That's
a phrase that went around for a long time.
or clothes maketh the man. Remember that one? Clothes
Yes.
maketh the man. Um, and simultaneously to that, I auditioned for a crazy television show in Australia called Commotion. I don't know if you want to hear this stuff, but it's pretty interesting.
Well,
I'm
sure.
just
It's part of the story,
taking you
right?
up to how I became who I am today. And strangely enough, that was a lip sync show, which sounds ridiculous because this is way before things like MTV.
Milli Vanilli, right?
Exactly. So I'm syncing 5 nights a week, or and the show went absolutely viral. And within a week, I'm signing autographs in restaurants because the show went crazy. So that completely went to my head. I was 21. So
Oh, sure.
I'm doing fashion, I'm doing TV. So it was actually a great platform for me to, shall we say, just be a person that's able to be out there, you know?
Right,
Coupled with the fact that I'm Aquarius, that doesn't hurt either. So the ego sort of went boom. And I
sure.
think it stayed there for a long time. And we all know that ego is the opposite to spirituality. In other
Well, I
words,
don't know that it's the opposite because as we learn in this dualistic framework that we've been given, we live in paradox, right? Which is embracing, not making distinctions.
right. Okay. So, okay.
Just a food for thought, right?
Yeah, I like that. So, from there, from Australia, um, I left Australia about 35 years ago. I was successful. I built my own brand in Australia. That went for about 15 years. The show that I was doing, the TV show, turned into a rock and roll band where I actually did start to sing, So it was all kind of things that were ego-based businesses. I had a PR company for 12 years. I sound
Right.
like a jack of all trades, but
Well, they helped you find your voice in the world at the
exactly,
time.
yeah. And left Australia about 35 years ago and lived in 6 countries. Lived in the best one was Rome for 10 years, where we started a kind of an Airbnb thing before Airbnb came along.
Hmm.
So when I look at all those experiences and my age, of course, and I look at all those experiences and everything, the natural path was what now? Like done this business. I was an entrepreneur here. I've done this. I've done that. I've been married twice. I've got two daughters. I'm not saying I've done everything because I don't want to be that guy. I've done it all. We've never done it all, but
Right.
ended
But
up.
you've enjoyed what was presented to
Uh,
you to
I've had a
experience.
I've had a blessed life.
Yeah.
Had a blessed life, and I really appreciate it. And Kabbalah happened about. I knew there was something else, and I wanted to go spiritual. Kabbalah happened about 12 years ago, and with that came with the experiences, with the wake of studying spirituality. If people don't know what Kabbalah is, it's an ancient wisdom that's about 4,000 years old. So it's a breakaway from it's not religious as such.
No.
It's more of a
Well, it's
break.
like the Vedas, right? Which are even older, right?
Mm,
They express that we're all divine threads connected to source, capable of God consciousness. And that's kind of what the Kabbalah says too.
yeah. So
Now we
I
just get
love
confused about what God consciousness is,
it.
right?
Yeah. So when I thought about all the experiences and all the businesses and the spirituality, I thought, well, I did the course, of course. I got the International Coaching Federation certificate and all that, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean as much as what my own experiences combined with my spiritual life brought. And I
Well,
thought,
yeah, that gives you the umbrella from which to work with, but it's that direct experience from which we draw our truth, right?
yeah,
That's the only thing we can rely on is our
yeah,
direct experience. We
yeah,
can filter it through all the other input, right? But still boils down to how we can interpret and integrate that direct experience in greater ways.
yeah, I agree. I agree. And today I bring those experiences, as you say, and that spirituality combined together. I bring it to. I've got a platform where I coach a lot of Microsoft guys and Virgin Airway guys, and you know sometimes I'm a little bit hesitant to swing over to the spiritual side, and yet it's been so well received by
Oh,
these guys,
sure.
leaders, executives. I kind of nudge my way in, and I'm thinking, and the answer is always, gee, Leon, I didn't expect this kind of coaching because they're thinking I'm going to talk about their career and how they
Right.
can go up the ladder, how they can make more money, how they can, have a better life. And I do all that, but when I bring in the spiritual side, and we talk about things like the soul, and we talk about things like love. That can be a really dirty word. That can be a really bad word in the corporate world,
Oh,
but yet
sure.
it works. And I didn't expect this, Leon, but you know what? I liked it. Can we do this again next week?
Right.
So
Right.
go figure. It doesn't mean
Oh,
that I'm
yeah.
strong.
I can relate totally to that, and not at the level that you had in my early. I started out in the aerospace industry and was a
Oh,
machinist, and then went into production control because of the attitude that I had. I was kind of asked that, or told that, hey, this department likes guys like you, because I'd piss everybody else off, right? So, in doing that, I was the youngest guy in a 35 person department, rose to the top of the production charts, didn't know it until a couple of supervisors came to me and said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just treating people like I'd want to be treated, to love and be loved, right? I didn't really say that, but that's what gave that success the legs. And eventually, I suggested interpersonal skills classes for the department. That went over like a lead balloon. This was the mid 80s, right? I was
oh
26
wow.
at the time. Right.
What a risk. What a
Oh,
risk.
I didn't think of it as a risk. I saw it as a necessity if things were going to work, right? Because there was all this confusion, people beating each other up, trying to get the job done when it was unnecessary. And I'd proven it. And yet I got a bunch of flack. I got totally ditched by the people in the department when I brought that suggestion up in a departmental meeting. But then 4.5 years later, after I was gone, went through a divorce, expulsion from church at the same time, and left the corporate world, I found out that they'd instituted interpersonal skills classes plant wide. So
Oh,
what I began to do, even as a disruptor, and risking everything and finding the results of that. Because at that time, you were shunned, right? You were moved out of the way as quickly as possible because you rocked the boat. Now, today, totally different. And you just exampled that with what you talked about with your
Yeah,
discussions with the Microsoft and um,
Virgin,
the executives, right? So
the executives.
proof's in the pudding, right? This gradually
Yeah,
took time, and now it's evidence. Interpersonal skills classes or the skills is now turned into emotional intelligence.
yeah, and also it addresses the fear issue because when you talk corporate, it just comes with a fear ticket. Fear that he'll do better than me, fear that he's being heard, fear that I won't get that position, fear that tomorrow they might call it a day for me. There's just a fear happening
Right.
in corporate. And I just found that talking about the soul, talking about love, talking about nurturing us, talking about empathy, talking about emotional intelligence to leaders, how to treat others, to remember that they're not machines, right?
Hmm.
I just found that landed well because fear is really what drives that whole corporate machine, isn't it? Underneath that, reaching the KPIs and the bottom line and getting the numbers and
Yep.
you're doing better than him. It's all fear based.
Yep.
So by
It is.
bringing,
The push for performance, and you're pushing and pulling energy in all kinds of different directions in order to do that. And yet, as you were mentioning when you begin talking about the soul and love, that leads to flow. And the work that Csikszentmihalyi did with flow, the psychology of optimal experience, expresses that in definitive ways. It's, and as a drummer, I can totally relate to it in jam
you're a
sessions, right? You
drummer,
lose yourself. Yeah.
I'm a guitarist.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
so music, my wife's a pianist. She was a trained pedagogue from Russia. And so understanding this musical structure that we have, right? Where our bodies are instruments. We don't know how to tune them, let alone play in concert. And what you're doing with the work and conversations is helping to tune those instruments.
Yeah, and I often say to some of these leaders, people when you change, and this is what most people don't get. They don't get it, but I'm getting across to them. When you change, it's not about what it's like people feel you before they hear you.
Absolutely.
People feel, so when you
Now, why
change,
is that, do you think?
well, frequency, because we've got this, I think, is it 18 feet or 8 feet of energy that, well, in the modern world, they used to call it, he's got good vibes or he's got bad vibes, didn't they? I mean, you
Right,
remember that.
right, right,
Why is that? Because we are energy. That's why it is. We are energy. So I mean, why is it that someone walks into a room and everyone radiates towards them and someone else walks into a room and this guy's wearing Prada and this guy's wearing a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and the Prada guy doesn't have the energy that attracts people, and the jeans and t-shirt guy, it's about his energy.
right,
It's his light. It's his light. It,
right,
it just
right.
draws people towards him.
And we can
Um,
see that evidence in a lot of places too. And um, the evidence is everywhere. I've been to shows for a while at concerts,
yeah,
and huge difference, the between Depeche Mode and the Eagles. And the Eagles had no energy, had felt nothing from them. Depeche and the crowd as a vendor was cacophonic. They were pushing and shoving and arguing and all kinds of stuff in front of vendor tables. Depeche Mode, total opposite. The people stood in front of each of the vendors, right? In a single file line, automatically were just these happy, conversant, caring individuals instead of these competitive ne'er-do-wells that were fighting for position. And
yeah, I'm really surprised when you say that because when you think about the Eagles' music, the energy of their music is, they're not my
It
favorite
would
because
it would
the energy
seem
of their
right.
the energy of their music is full on.
It would seem that way, but in person, this is how I felt. I can't say that,
Wow.
the same for others, but having that deep sensitivity that I do, this was something that was a stark difference that I observed. Now,
Mm.
there's another, you were talking about I think that 8 feet um, auric field, right?
I think it's eight, yeah, the energy field
Well,
around us.
there's multiple levels of that depending on where you are. Like Lao Tzu says, if you're in the past or the future, you're in stress. It's the present that makes the moment, right? Well, there's a technique I was taught by a woman that was trained in the Huna, um, and she had dowsing rods. And right before she gave her presentation, I showed up early, so it was just her and I in this 40-foot square room. And I asked her what she was doing. She said, "Well, let me show you." Right. So she stood me in one corner and said, "Okay, what I want you to do is close your eyes, focus on the past, go there with an event, and just really be there. I'm going to go to the other corner, the hypotenuse of the triangle, right? And I'm going to clear the rods and I'm going to walk towards you. And I'm going to stop where the rods open up and we're going to mark the spot. And then we're going to do it from the future and the present as
Mm.
well." I said, "Cool. All right." So we did that. The amazing thing was the past and the future opened in relatively the same spot, about 6 feet away.
Wow.
The present, right at the end of it, she picks up a rock out of the windowsill, says, "Okay," puts that in my hand, says, "Focus on this." And I did. She barely got 2 steps in from the other side of the room. So that went from roughly 6 feet to, I think the hypotenuse is somewhere around a 54 feet. So it would have been around a 50 foot. So that's a huge difference in the energy sensitivity that the rods picked up.
Yeah. But that's fascinating, but it's not just luck that gives one person the ability
Absolutely
or the
not.
energy to draw people to them.
Yeah,
So touching on this, which I don't know, people may think, we're nuts.
we're a little weird.
Has it got to do with past lives? In other words, on the basis of this,
Hmm.
if someone's been here, like if someone's been here many times before, he's going to have a different energy. It's almost like
Hopefully, if
someone
they
that's
learned the lessons in those lifetimes, yeah, you have
otherwise they repeat
right.
it. um, is he going to have a different energy? I like to call it someone that's in kindergarten hasn't been here as many times as someone that's sort of in university, in life
Right.
university. So they're going to have different energies, aren't they?
Sure. And there's also that possibility of planet hopping too for individuals that have specific design that go around the universe when certain things are ready to happen. And there's a group, right, that's associated with that
And they
generally.
call yeah, and I think they call that kind of energy where people radiate towards you charisma.
Hmm.
Charisma's got, I think it's from a spiritual world, charisma, but I can't quite remember. Because charisma is not somebody with a good personality. Charisma is not somebody that can tell jokes. Charisma is not somebody that knows how to hold their knife and fork. People get it all wrong. Charisma is an energy.
Yeah, it's
He's
somebody
got
that can stand
charisma.
out in a crowd without saying a word.
That's charisma. And I, I'm astonished where actually a study hasn't yet, or maybe it has that I don't know of, hasn't been done of answering those questions. Why do some people have an energy that draw that people radiate towards them without saying a word, as you say, and others can be the best dressed, even the best looking person in the room, um, with the best car,
Right.
and nothing.
Well,
Or
again, that's the frequency, right? We talked earlier in the
yeah, but they
prelim for,
study. But that's what I'm saying.
right.
It astonishes me that a study hasn't been done on that. Where did that frequency come from? And what is the difference between these frequencies? And why does this person have a frequency that draws energy, that draws people, and this person's frequency doesn't?
Sure. Well, Hawkins tried to do that with his scale, right? The scale of consciousness. Gives you an idea of where somebody was at. I'm not so sure about the kinesthetic approach in measurement, right? However, it works for many and it gives an illustration, like spiral dynamics as well, right?
Mm.
It gives the overview of a population's ranking in that escalating consciousness from war to unity without judging, right? That's the thing that we tend to do that we need to step away from. Just observe and say, okay, that's there. That's what is. Doesn't need to have any kind of judgment towards it, because that inhibits our ability to navigate, right?
Cities have a frequency. You know, I was in New York not that long ago, 6 weeks ago. I just love the a lot of people don't like New York, and it's not about liking New York, it's about the frequency of New York.
Right.
It's full on. It's like you don't need to sleep as much there. You know.
Well, right. And here's an interesting thing. For years, I did events um, here in the States, and some of them attracting 250,000 people in one night. New Year's Eve block party for the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl. I was one of 5 guys that put it together. And that kind of energy that you're talking about,
Yeah.
it's just um, when you're in it and you give yourself to it, things flow. You're directed, and it's not necessarily I think it has to do with thinking to some degree the questions you ask, what's next? What can I do? How can I serve? Um, you know, what's about to happen that needs adjusting so that it doesn't fall apart? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, it's that energy that you speak of that just it's indistinguishable. Um,
So what came first? The
Chicken or
New
the
York
egg?
the New York energy, or did the people, yeah, chicken or the egg, or did the people did was it what came first? It,
Well,
it can't be that the city has an energy, the people
considering,
create the energy.
well, there's multiple layers of structure, right? There's the interior structure of the planet
Mm.
that has configurations and energy flows and conduits. We know about vortexes and ley lines and those kinds of things. Some like Stonehenge is supposedly on something like that, the Chaco Canyon, Sedona, those kinds of places. So there's that intrinsic structure in the planet, but when you bring people into those places and you have the kind of activity that you do, like in New York, that energy is exacerbated, right? And it's often taken to the extreme. Now, in New York, there's this push for production, right? And
Yeah.
there's no bullshit in it, right?
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of the marketing techniques, right? Ogilvy and those guys. Um, there's still that presence that is undeniable from other places. I mean, you could, for instance, I went to Santiago, Chile. Um, Same kind of you know, um, national attention, right, as one of the major cities there. But the energy is so much softer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I was amazed at that difference. Now, what do you think, going back into the Kabbalah,
Yeah.
how does this relate to your studies and what you're finding in how we as a civilization are progressing?
Uh, I think there's a hunger as a civilization. I think there's a hunger for spirituality because the plan up until now hasn't really worked. So now people are opening up towards spirituality. That's what I'm finding. Yeah. They're open to it. I'm noticing when I'm talking to people about it. I do like street interviews, which is on TikTok, uh, which I say, what is spirituality? And everyone has a different view. But the
Mhm.
question alone seems to open people kind of, if I said that 10 years ago, people would run, right? But I'm saying it now to people. What is spirituality? That's all I say. What is spirituality to you? And people will stop and give an opinion. Some people say, it doesn't matter what they say. Some say, well, I believe in God, it's a religion, or I go to church, or I go to synagogue. And others will say, it's a force. Everyone has an opinion. But what I'm noticing is the word spirituality is now getting more attention. So,
Mhm.
from a Kabbalah tonight, actually, there's an introduction in Kabbalah, but more people are radiating towards Kabbalah. Um, there's an awakening at the moment. Does
Right,
that make
right,
sense?
right.
From an individual point of view, I also notice my authentic if I bring my authentic who I am, like I'll always meditate before I do a session with someone.
Sure.
If I bring the less I say, the better. So I don't need to motivate people anymore. I need to make people feel authentic about who they are, you know, to get in touch with their soul. And that helps them a lot more than to do the rah rah stuff. You can do it, John, write 1,000 times, I am enough.
Right.
That kind
Well,
of
as a
shows.
coach, let me ask you this, is it more
Yeah,
about getting the other to feel like they are the one that accomplishes as opposed to you being the cheerleader of it?
exactly the first one. It's an exploration.
Hmm.
It's an exploration for them to realize that, hey, I'm not really that insecure, unworthy guy.
Right.
I can go deeper than that, and I'm more worthy than that.
In a sense, you give them permission.
I give them permission to be authentic, because
Right.
the corporate world, everyone's playing a role or an identity, and they've bought that. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, and they've bought that identity, and that's how they're operating. And as long as they're operating from an identity, they're not in touch with themselves.
Right. Well, and identities, depending on where you are in the layers of that organization,
Yeah,
those identities have a collective intelligence that comes along with them, patterns of all kinds of
yeah.
things, right? And I noticed that, or have you noticed that in the various places you've been, as you've deepened your understanding of things, where you can look back and say, oh, I can see how in this position I had that perspective and it managed these results. Whereas if I had a different perspective, then I could have accomplished a different thing, maybe done a little bit better, right? The re-examining, not to the point of wanting to beat up on yourself. This is about self-examination and learning.
Yeah, and identity becomes habit as well. And
Hmm.
habit is identity, identity is habit, and pretty soon is, oh, this is me. This is the way I've got to behave. And to me, that's an energy repellent, by the way. When you meet somebody who's living an identity, it
You can
does,
feel it,
you feel it, and
right?
they make you feel uncomfortable in your skin because they're uncomfortable in theirs. Does that make sense? If I
Absolutely.
if I'm
Absolutely. Now, we don't always recognize that because, as we were talking earlier, we live with shoulders up, right? We're not sensitive to the body. The body is where all these vibrations are felt and interpreted and then fed into the quantum computer on our shoulders. What do we do? How do we become more available, more vulnerable to those senses, those feelings, and the interpretation of them without putting a judgment or criticism on it to do something about it.
Great question. By going from, but by through consciousness and awareness, going from there into the heart.
Longest journey is
Think,
18 inches, right?
thinking with the heart, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And you'll know more. You know about that. Thinking with the heart, you know.
Well, or I would say take it further. We can't think our way through a system built on vibration. We've got to sense our way through it. And that's a different perspective because we're used to thinking, right? We got 70,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are
We're on default.
self-deprecating.
Yeah. And can I add to that 60 or 70,000 thoughts? A- According to neuroscience, uh, over 60% of them are negative
I'd venture
thoughts.
to say they're probably, in most individuals, they're closer to 80 or 85%. Because
Yeah.
if when you start paying attention to how you think about yourself, you're always being critical.
Beating yourself up.
Yeah.
We spoke about that in our pre-conversation. Thinking in this, yeah, yeah. And
Stinking thinking, right? So how do we get beyond that? Right? What do we do? What can we acknowledge? What can we observe? What can we bring into our lives that
okay.
help us to move beyond that?
So there's an ego that we need to show up, and
Hmm.
there's an ego that we don't need, which in Kabbalah is called the opponent. So the opponent is continuously, and it starts with an emotion first, but the opponent is continuously talking to you on default. You won't be able to do that. You're not, it's continuously feeding you. Its
Right.
job is to feed you those 80% negative thoughts that you said. Its job is to feed you those thoughts, and it does a fabulous job of it. You
Sure.
can either listen to that ego opponent, you, you can either listen to it or become the watcher of it. Now, is that easy to do? No, but it's a
Mm-mm.
habit.
No,
Why
but or you
not?
could be your own opponent of it and say,
Yeah,
"Oh, that's what you think, huh? Well, let
yeah,
me show
yeah,
you."
yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm going to prove you wrong.
You're not invited, or you're not invited to this party.
Right.
You're not. Thanks for sharing, but you're not invited. So it's being the watcher rather than a participant. It's almost going outside of yourself. And
Well,
when
that's the
you
goal of
start
meditation,
questioning,
isn't it?
yeah. And when you start questioning those emotions and those negative feelings, the more you question them, just through the questioning, you dissipate their pull over you.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Inquiry, the most precious thing that we can do is ask questions, right?
Yeah, but people don't because people don't ask enough questions.
And why do you think that is? Is it because we have this knowledge base that based on our programming, right, that we
Fear,
haven't
fear,
questioned yet?
fear of looking dumb, maybe, or fear of it's a silly question, or fear. But Kabbalah is all about questioning.
Sure. It's kind
Why?
of about
Why?
playing the fool, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, but we have a fear
I don't
of.
know. Let's find out. What about this, right?
You've seen people in seminars, anyone got a question, and there must be tons of people that want to ask something, but only very few will put up their hand and ask the question because the others think I'm going to look silly asking this question.
Sure.
So they've already
Now,
negated.
well, let's take that to the next level too, right? So these questions are in the thoughtmosphere, right?
Yeah,
People are thinking about them. They don't want to ask them. And then there's a brave soul who's open enough that asks the question that's on however many minds simultaneously and brings it into the atmosphere instead. Now, and people don't often think about that, but and is that an aspect of being vulnerable enough to allow that authentic self to come forth?
100%. And vulnerability is very attractive. Vulnerability is very attractive. And you notice when the person that puts up their hand to ask that question, uh, someone that didn't ask always is thinking, I wish I had have asked that. I wish I had have asked that. But it's not wanting to look, and also being judged. It's such a big deal being
Sure.
judged. What will other people think? Other people are too busy thinking about themselves to judge you or to think about you. And that's what we
Hmm.
don't understand. And it immobilizes people when they start comparing themselves and 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 judging what other people may think. It keeps them stuck.
Yeah.
But your soul wants you to be open. Your soul is open. Your soul is not the cognitive part. It wants you to share. It wants you to be authentic. It wants you to be vulnerable. It wants you to love. But,
It's the
from a,
being that you are, right? It's
yeah,
that, um, well, today's what I'm thinking is recursive function, right?
yeah,
The we've found out the term, right, through the large language models and their use, and recursive function means a system that queries itself for problem solving, right? We do the same thing. And the better we can do that without attachment to the information that comes to it, the more vulnerable we can be comfortable in that, because the overriding energy is just energy, right? It's not qualified. I think the Rancher book calls it the unqualified absolute,
hmm,
right? There's an essence of that. There's a truth. There's a harmony that is natural within that, that when we participate fully, that begins to become more present. And do you notice that in the work that you've done with the corporations as you've talked about these various elements?
One 100%. I'm glad you brought that up because I always say to leaders, vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is actually a way of opening yourself up to others. Being vulnerable is the authentic us.
Hmm.
Being vulnerable creates an openness that other people can radiate towards. Because there's this hard shell on corporate. There's this very hard shell. There's this sort of let's put a wall around our heart, and that's going to make me go forward. I'm going to be successful when I get tough. I'm not going to be vulnerable.
Right.
Vulnerable is weak.
Well,
Vulnerable
it's
is
steeped in
authentic.
competition, right? That's where all that comes. Dudley Lynch, bless his heart, gave me the moniker Possibilities Coagulator a couple of decades ago.
Yeah.
And man, what fit. But he, in one of his books, Mother of All Mind, he says that we basically have an alpha mind and alpha chassis. And this is the old paradigm, right? And the
Yes.
alpha mind is steeped in competition. Now, in the new normal, they didn't call it that, but we have a beta mind, still alpha chassis, still got the body, right? But the beta mind now understands the concept of oneness, which is a systems approach, right? Rather than an individuated, navigable, path
Yeah.
to
No,
whatever.
you mean dropping the hierarchical way of thinking?
It doesn't necessarily eliminate the hierarchical way of thinking because there's still a structure, right?
Yeah, but
It's just not the silo.
yeah.
It's not the top-down management, right?
Yeah, but there's still a structure, but you don't have to keep whipping the people that are down as the pyramid goes down.
No,
You're
no,
not
no.
whipping the people anymore. You're
Right.
relating to them.
In fact, just the opposite is true, right? And the new term servant leadership examples that, right? Where you work for everybody else. They don't work for you, right? It's your job to provide them the tools, the training, the understanding, the expertise to do their job to the best of their capability.
At the same time, having the empathy to understand them as human beings, and
Yes.
knowing that when they go home, you don't know the situation of, I always say this to leaders. Oh, look, I've got 6 guys doing well, but I've got 3 guys um, that just can't seem to get it. I'm just giving a sort of a broad brush example. I said, well, you don't know what's going on with those guys. You don't know what's going on at home with them. You don't know, whether their wife is ill. You don't know whether they're in the middle of a separation. You don't know their lives. So
Right.
go past the point of they're not getting it and start relating to them um,
Oh,
as
but
people.
but wait a minute. You got to leave home at home and work at work.
No, no,
Right.
not true.
That's the
That
old paradigm.
that's a great one. Yeah, it's the old. That is a very old paradigm. It's the same person coming to work as came from home. It's the same human being with the same soul, with the same heart, with the same
Hmm.
problems. It's the same
No,
person. You
why do
can't
you
leave
think?
it. You can't leave it at home.
No, you can. Why do you think we have this notion that you can separate everything, categorize it, and then still deal with
I think
life
I think it's an old
effectively?
paradigm. It's an old paradigm. You come here, you slog your heart out, then you go home, and that's what you paid for. I don't want to know anything else. That's the old paradigm.
Now, does this kind of stem from John Gray's work and men are from Mars, women are from Venus? Because the masculine
That was a book.
perspective
That's a
is said,
book, isn't it? That's a book.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and it basically it says, men compartmentalize things, where the masculine energy compartmentalizes because it has to deal with all kinds of stuff, where the feminine energy is global, right? It's constantly looking at how to nurture and
Well,
guide.
well, if you've ever noticed, women are innately more spiritual than men and more comfortable. Now, if you've ever seen a
Well, they're
group of
built
women,
for it, for first of all right there, that's where from
yeah,
procreation, right? They're
yeah.
responsible, so they're given those faculties.
Exactly. And if you've ever seen, a bunch of women that have even just met, like Susan, this is Joan, and this is Jill, and you watch, they're going to get on right away. They get on right away much easier. And when you watch a bunch of guys, it's still, especially a bunch of corporate guys, they're still kind of puffing their chest out, still a little bit scared to be vulnerable. Whereas the women will just flow into like they've known each other forever. Have you ever
Right.
seen that? We
Oh
see
yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
there's also, you remind me of a dear friend, now on the other side. His name was Willie Whitefeather, and he was talking about, he was a Native American storyteller, and he was expressing that one of their prophecies is that the women would cut their hair and put on war paint and go to battle. And if you look at the corporate world now, you've got women with short hair, dressed to the nines, with plastered with makeup, all of this, prophetic fulfillment that's taking place, where the feminine
Yeah.
energy or women are trying to take on the masculine energy and perform that way, and that's not working either, right? And and yet the most successful men are taking on the feminine energy, becoming vulnerable and showing what that servant leadership and the love of others, right? Because they love themselves first. You can't love anybody else until you fully love yourself.
100%.
Then that just takes a whole different approach to leadership, and companies have a tendency of really having a community rather than an organization.
I
What do you?
agree. I agree. And I'm finding it much more, and that's why I'm finding what I said to you early in the conversation, that there's a hunger for it now, even in the corporate world, that these
Mhm.
leaders are now, this exploration I'm having with them, where I was treading a bit carefully with the vulnerability and the soul and all that kind of languaging and those kind of explorations and feelings. I'm now finding that they're kind of saying, give me more. which makes me very happy because it means that I don't have to adopt, I don't have to, I don't know, I never wanted to be the motivational coach. I never wanted
Sure.
to be the screaming, uh, uh,
I find it very inauthentic, honestly.
and it probably works for a short time
Sure.
because, it works for a short
Oh,
time
I
because
remember the rah rah from the Amway seminars, right? You go out, they pump you up, and you go, and it's like, almost immediately your energy diminishes because it's not sustainable.
it's not sustainable because they're just words going into your brain, but it hasn't changed your internal.
Hmm.
It hasn't opened your heart. It hasn't given you vulnerability. It hasn't given you any more emotional intelligence. It hasn't given you empathy. It hasn't given you humility. All those things that we need, all those things that are missing uh, in corporate.
Now, with the work that you're doing, and obviously I know what partially this answer is going to be, how do you see that evolving? How do you see that spilling out across the spectrum to where there's more focus on being a planetary citizen, right? Which is one who considers themselves to be a citizen of the earth first, right? Donald Keyes came up with the idea, and others. Uh,
Global citizen.
yeah, because we live in one world, right? One planet, one air, water that's it's strewn about everywhere. But it's the same water, right? It's a little different here and there, but how
Mm.
do we integrate that understanding so that going forth in the coming years, and especially with the use of AI, right? How do we gear that activity toward an effective distribution of resources so that so it works for everyone, right? So that we don't have the deplorable conditions in some places of the world that we do today.
Because good energy is also contagious, meaning what people don't understand, I think, is the power that we have as one individual. One individual. We don't believe it. We don't believe it. I'm just a guy, that I do this, I do this. But what are you? I'm an architect. Uh, you know, but
There's the
what are
identity
you? What
again, right?
you know? But that's not what you are. So when we realize the power that we have and the influence we have over others as a single person, when
Hmm.
each person starts, it's like in Kabbalah, they say it's like this. You walk into a dark room, huge room, there's 1,000 people. It's completely black. It's dark. I light a candle and I light the other guy's candle, and he lights the other person's candle, and pretty soon the room comes to light. I know that's an analogy of it, but that kind of answers your question. It's about me changing first. When I
Yep.
change, I've got a lot of influence, and I'll change that person changes that person changes that person. And within that, I think there's already a hunger for that. There's already a frequency, which we were talking about before, that's demanding that from us.
Sure, sure.
So I don't know if that answers the question properly, but
I don't know if there's a proper answer, right? Because we all, and this is one of the questions I wanted to ask. Do you find that in especially in your question about what spirituality, right? Do you find that most of the people said relatively the same thing, just in different words?
do you know what? It's not even the importance of what they're saying. The importance of this is that they're actually stopping and contemplating it
Hmm.
and giving me some form of answer. Some people might say, look, I've thought about it, but I don't think I can give you an answer. I'm more interested in that they're actually considering the question with
Sure.
such interest than the answer. Some are good answers, some are, basic answers. But what I'm noticing is that there's an interest in the question. That's what I'm liking. The
That
interest in the question.
moves everything, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
The question's more important than the answer in this case.
Oh, always is, right?
Yeah, always, always, always.
And
So
generally, the answer is contained in the question, as we move along. Not always, however, that um, instance of asking the question and then being able to still oneself and allow the answer to emerge is part of that recursive function, being able to collapse within into nothingness and allow it to emerge unscathed, right? Now, in that um, exploration, we talk about the being, right? What if we just began the a statement of being, right? I am, and then allowing whatever to come up within us, not trying to answer that, just allow it. What would you think would happen with
that's a
that?
great question. The problem with that question is I am goes straight to the cognitive, and then the person comes back with um, I am a lawyer,
Right.
or I am an architect, or I am uh, a plumber. But that's not what I am. That's not what I am. So
Well, maybe the I am a plumber. Well, yes, and what else, right? And so you just keep pulling on that thread, right, till you get to that place where you can simply just say, I am.
wasn't it I am that I am or something? Wasn't I think
Exactly.
yeah, I am
Yeah,
that I am.
when I think it was when Moses, asked the question, "Who are you?"
Mm.
And the voice was, "I am that I am." Well,
Yeah.
if we're to take that information, that nugget, right, and we each, as Jesus taught, right, we're all God, right? And not that we're all God, we all have connection. The Vedas say you all have the opportunity for God consciousness. Well, what's that mean? It means you have infinite intelligence available for your specific purpose, for you.
If there's a creator, if we are created, if there's a creator, without getting over religious, because that always, freaks people out. If
Yeah.
there's a creator and we were created, then we carry some of the DNA of that creation. So
I,
if
I
we
think it
carry
goes
some of
deeper than
that,
that, if I may.
yeah,
One of my explorations, and this is going to go, we're on the precipice, right? I'm going to dive on. So my question was, and I carried this for decades, where did the Trinity originate? And I was in a process called a multi-level awareness technique developed by William Swigart. Basically, it is a guided process where you go inside and you start exploring. Well, my guide shows up. I'd met him in college. His name was Zephyr. And I'm inside. I see the screen open up. I see him. He waves to me, says, "Come." I'm out of body. We're traveling across the universe. Stars go by at first, then there's darkness. And I keep trying to ask him where we're going. And, we have this conversation on the way there. Didn't realize how long it took until afterwards. But we eventually arrive at this three sun system with about a dozen really bright green planets around it, similar in size. And the suns themselves are the same size, but they're about 100 times bigger than the planets. And I feel like Jodie Foster just coming out of the wormhole, with the tears streaming down my face and just the awe of this, right? And so I'm just looking. And then I hear three voices as one say, "We are not only your forefathers, we're also the forefathers of your solar system."
wow.
And I wanted to ask more questions. What do you mean? Start exploring it. And Zephyr says, "Nope, that's it. You got all you need. You'll figure it out." And I'm like, "Oh, come on." So on the way back, we're talking about things, and I recognize, okay, if this is the micro's got to be the proton, electron, and neutron, and the consciousness has to be in the space between that, right? In order for it to merge. Well, what's that mean? Well, then I eventually got to the place where, okay, in the periodic table, every element has a proton, electron, and neutron except hydrogen. Okay, so
Mm.
where's hydrogen fit? Most plentiful gas in the universe, powers the sun, and is the bonding agent for our DNA helix. So how
Yeah.
might that fit? Right? So there's a tertiary component that we don't see, right? Because when we see an anomaly in the universe, it means we don't understand it yet. Because there are no anomalies in a perfect creation, right? So
We
now that
don't
we
under,
see this tertiary element that had been invisible, here's the apocalypse, right? The unveiling, right, of hidden knowledge. It's possible it's the conduit of that perfected form, fit, and function, or the God consciousness that we each carry because of our incarnation.
I like the word consciousness because I believe consciousness is everything. So how do I
We
even
don't have a better
explain it?
word for it yet.
No, but why I think consciousness is everything is because consciousness is the only thing that can take us, if we can, consciousness is the only thing that can take us to another realm, to a higher us. You know, if we're not
Sure. And there's
conscious,
layers of that consciousness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And we can actually live in another world in a consciousness.
And
Yeah,
we do. There's another
we do,
one of
yeah.
Zweigard's techniques is called the multi-plane awareness technique. And it takes the participant, guided by a facilitator, through 9 planes of consciousness and integrates your body on each one of those planes. Now, you want to talk about an out there experience. It's who we are. We're finding out now that we are multidimensional. Even quantum sciences is saying, oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
there's multiple dimensions.
we need the physical to be on this planet. We have to have
Well,
this.
as creators from the
We have to
formless,
have we
yeah.
have to have this shell, but we can live in another realm. We don't have to.
Well, not just
And
can we, I believe we do simultaneously, and in what we perceive to be the physical form, that's our way to experience the creation that we had part in making.
I'm just digesting that.
Well, you consider the formless consciousness that had to learn how to condense into form. How would that show up?
Condense into form.
Right. If you're stepping down a vibratory rate from that very high pitched, effervescent, iridescent, high pitched sensation, right? As
Mhm.
it descends, it creates form. The light and sound as the or light and music. As those vibratory rates condense or lower in frequency, they become what we consider to be form.
Yeah, yeah, I got it now. Never thought of it that way, but thanks for explaining that.
Well, it fits into solfeggio tones, right?
Mm.
9 layers. Fits into the spiral dynamics model. It fits into the multi-plane model. It fits into the model that Dr. Irvin Laszlo talks about, the higher self being the avatar, as Tom Campbell talks about, and ruling how we eventually can behave when we acquiesce and become vulnerable enough to it, to where that's what we give our attention to rather than trying to fit in where others think we ought to be.
Yeah, and vulnerability is the opposite of reaction. So
Mm-hmm.
again, getting back to that corporate world, there's constant sort of knee-jerk reactions to situations, and that's a lot what I bring to the table to some of the leaders too. That I say, the more you react, so it's like when something happens, pause, and they say, "Well, how can I pause?" I've got pause because if this is the source or this is the light, let's call it the light in Kabbalah,
Right.
and when you react, you're creating space between you and the consciousness of the source, if that makes sense, for more negativity to come in. The more you pause and don't react to a situation, do not react. the more you are like the source, the more consciousness you can.
And you
It's like,
invite resolution.
yeah, but in the corporate world, it's all you're so disconnected from the source. You're so disconnected from pure consciousness, and
Right.
the closer you can get to pure consciousness, the more you're going above, the more you can restrict, the more godlike you become.
Say that again. The more you
Can restrict,
the urge to control.
the more godlike you can become.
Right. Yeah, I would
Because
include the more you can restrict the
yeah,
urge to control
yeah,
and simply
because
invite.
God,
Yeah.
yeah, because God, again, not getting religious, just doesn't react and does. So God's only giving, right? So when you're talking about God, the force that
Well, it
God is
just is. It's
only
like the
giving.
unqualified absolute. We
Yeah,
take that energy and qualify it.
yeah. So God's only giving, right? He's not reacting. So when we react, we're not being godlike. We're going away from the source.
Right.
So we're allowing negativity to come in. And our job is not to allow any and the ego loves that. Oh,
Sure.
great, I can jump in here, right?
Right.
And our job is not to allow negativity in. And if we react to situations, and I'm not even I'm talking about lining up for a cup of coffee and thinking in small terms, that guy just pushed in. He's got to be kidding. There's a line here, or getting
Right.
annoyed just in little things every day.
Now, do you
Every
let that go? All right. Take it to the next level. Do you let that happen, or to acknowledge the integrity that's been violated, you open your mouth and say something?
The word violated already bothers me, but no, you don't say anything. You don't say anything. You allow, you restrict. Obviously, in a world we have to be able to defend ourselves. In a world we have to be able to stand up for ourselves. But most of it is not necessary. Most of getting annoyed because there's a traffic jam and freaking out
Sure.
because you're sitting in. There's nothing you can do about this traffic jam,
Excuse me.
but you're creating this negativity inside you, which
Right.
is which is not allowing you to have that godlike consciousness anymore.
Sure.
You're
What,
getting
how, let me ask
annoyed.
you this though. When you see that, there's a sense that that's incongruous with the harmony of the situation, right? Because in this line, right, that person has just entered themselves in a place where they weren't invited, first of all, right?
Yeah.
So they interrupt the flow. Now, whether that's a person cutting in line or somebody, striking their kid in a grocery store, um, aren't would we, coming from that place of love, be obligated to say, hey, that's not really appropriate, right? Could you, not
Or
necessarily
even
aggressing towards them, but just calling it out. Says, that doesn't feel good to me. Why do you do that?
yes and no, because even that aspect for me is still judging because I'm going along telling that woman that's not
Well, is it
appropriate.
judging
Right?
or, well, I can see how that might be, but authentic, back to the authentic self, right? When you
What would it
feel
be
the
like?
disturbance,
What would it be like if you said something like, "Hey, is there anything I can help with here?" Rather than
absolutely.
that's not necessary or is that appropriate? The minute we get into is that appropriate, the minute we get into questioning, we're judging.
Thanks. Thank you for reframing that.
So there's a
I
way of,
agree.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah. And hey, that doesn't mean I don't get annoyed at the supermarket.
Oh, sure,
But
sure.
but I'm aware that I'm now conscious that I can catch myself. So I'm
Right.
trying to get better and better and better and
And
better.
even in conversation like we're having, right? We articulate things in ways that we're familiar with until another person says, how
Yeah,
about,
yeah, that's the
right? And then
ego.
it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Right?
Yeah, I'm not saying you got to lay down and be the doormat. That's not what I'm
But just
saying.
the opposite.
Yeah, I'm saying we've got to humility, dignity, love thy neighbor, if you will, for a biblical quote.
And being
Love,
vulnerable in that moment to raise the question.
and when you do screw up, know that you screwed up and don't do it next time.
Right,
Learn from, I shouldn't have raised my voice then. She was only the cashier. She,
right.
it wasn't her fault.
And if
She
it's
works here.
possible, actually make an apology, right? Be authentic and go back to the source and clean the energy.
Yeah, it's like you go to the supermarket, where's the cabbage? So the guy takes you down the wrong aisle and you look and it's not there, and you come back and say, look, you took me to aisle 4. There was no cabbage there. So I could either say it that way or not say anything at all, or just say, well, say to myself, well, he took me down here, there's no cabbage there. I could either go back and speak my mind to him, or I could say, I'll ask someone else to find the cabbage and just leave it alone. And maybe then go
Or
back and say, well,
maybe
God,
there was a serendipitous moment where they gave you the wrong directions in order for you to find something else of importance.
also a fantastic point. Great,
Right.
great point. Great point. Serendipitous moment. So it's not always a mistake. The mistake could be a reason. I get you.
Sure.
But
Yeah. And
these challenges are things we have to be, when you're talking about vulnerability, I'm talking about, let's not to separate ourselves from the consciousness of the light. I like to call
yeah,
it the light. It's what Kabbalah calls it.
sure.
Um, the light being the never-ending consciousness, no beginning, no end. We can't comprehend no end. We can only say it. We can't actually comprehend it. But
Right.
the all-knowing um, light, the
All
all-knowing.
it
So
is.
it knows
All
that
it
all it
is.
is. It knows the
Right.
beginning and it knows the end. And people always want to know what's going to happen tomorrow. What if I
Yeah.
do this? And we don't
Yeah.
know because we need to have free
Well,
will.
tomorrow will take
But
care of itself when you take
yeah,
care of this moment. Right. Now, speaking of separation, we have, gosh, had a wonderful conversation. Time has flown by.
yeah, it's a great conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Oh, and me too.
Yeah,
That's part of these conversations, right?
yeah.
We learn more, we share more, and we help others in the process too, just by
Or at
being
least they think
available.
about it. Listen, you and I aren't the masters of the universe, but this is what we've learned in our journey, so we can only share it.
We sure learned how to have fun in it, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It has been fun. It's been great.
So, what advice
Really,
could you give in parting? What's a simple thing that you could offer to others to
yeah.
consider in a moment-to-moment way?
Challenges, which we will always have and we've always had, challenges in life, doesn't matter how dark they look. It doesn't matter how bad they look, are actually a gift. When we can learn to look at our challenges, because most of us are only happy when good things are happening, you know. Oh, it was great. Oh, I just got a raise. Oh, I just bought a new frock. Most of us are only happy when good things are happening. And when there's challenges and when there's dark moments, um, we go down with that. Challenges are there and we need to celebrate them as a good thing. I know this challenge is good for me because I'm going to grow from this.
Hmm.
And it looks really bad. It looks really bad, but I'm certain this is good for me. I'm going to grow from this. And that's a tough one for most people to comprehend. But if you really look at your life, sometimes when we've wanted to turn left, and as you said, serendipitous, and we turn right by accident, something better happens.
Yeah.
But we forget about those things. We forget about the fact that that mistake was a blessing. So those dark moments, those challenges are blessings in disguise about to happen. And if you look at it that way, that's how miracles happen. When you When you learn to accept the dark with the light, that's where the miracles happen. But it's a consciousness, and it does take changing habits. So challenges, embrace them the same as you do the good times, because there's something on the other side of a challenge.
Absolutely.
I'll
Leon,
leave people with that.
perfect. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
and
It's been great.
energy.
Real
It's just
pleasure.
been, hmm. Thanks so much, Leon.
Take care, Zen. Okay.
Namaste and in-law catch. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel. And with Leon Kammer, we've had a wonderful time with you today. Come back, visit us again soon. I know you'll love it. And in addition to that, do visit planetarycitizens.net. And if you're interested in more, I've written almost 50 books now that are on Amazon. And each one of them is a fairly deep exploration and self-examination and what you can do and how to find it for yourself. So do explore that. Just look me up there under Zen Benefiel and you'll find a treasure trove of works. And I'll have Leon's information available in the description below as well. So thanks again so much. Have an awesome day, and we'll see you next time.